How bad is this fraud?
This is the worst fraud in human history.
How have Somalians gotten into the system to fraud the American taxpayer?
They have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fraudulent companies set up, and they're sucking billions of dollars out of the state of Minnesota.
And how have you seen the weaponization of the word racist and Islamophobe take power here?
Here in Minnesota, potentially the largest fraud to ever happen in America is happening right now, as billions of dollars has been laundered and funneled and given to Somali-ran businesses here inside of Minnesota, all across the state. I'm here in Minneapolis right now, and I'm meeting with a man who's been doing his own research for years, as he's been speculating this fraud, as he's seen it blatantly inside of his neighborhoods and the areas that he calls home. This is an interview with a man who has done everything possible to expose the fraud, and now let's get into the interview. What's the need for $2.25 million for daycare?
$1 million.
How come they said this building was closed?
There's a lot of fraud happening here in Minnesota. You've been living here for years now. How bad is this fraud?
So I was born in Minneapolis a long time ago. I've lived my whole life here, and my opinion is that this is the worst fraud in human history, what is occurring in Minnesota and more specifically in the Twin Cities right now.
How much money do you think has been sent around fraudulently here inside Minnesota?
Over the years, I would say anywhere from 80 to $100 billion.
And right now the big controversy is with Tim Walz and his government and the fraud that they've allowed to happen within the Somalian community. Right behind us is Cedar Riverside, a location where it is very densely populated with Somalians. How have Somalians gotten into the system to fraud the American taxpayer?
Well, so that complex you're seeing behind there, I attended the University of Minnesota, and in the area we're on right now, this is the West Bank, and it was always called the West Bank, and it was sort of the place to be when you're in college. And that was all student housing, 100%. That building you see in the background, it's now 100% Somali. And I can tell you confidently, they don't pay for their housing, they don't pay for their food, they don't pay for their vehicles. And on top of that, they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fraudulent companies set up, and they're sucking billions of dollars out of the state of Minnesota.
And how are they sucking billions of dollars out of the state of Minnesota?
Well, one example would be with the hundreds of child care facilities that they have set up. And on every one that I visited, and I've been to maybe 100 of them or more, I never, ever have seen one child at any facilities ever over the past 7 years, 8 years.
What are the businesses that are being used to fraud the taxpayer here in Minnesota? You have the daycares. What are all of them?
So you have, you have child care, you have adult daycare, you have in-home health care, you have straight health care, and nobody really knows how that's defined. And then you have transportation, non-emergency medical transportation. And if you do a search, you'll see that the state of Minnesota says they have 1,020 non-emergency medical transportation companies, and my research is showing that 95% of those are Somali-owned. And what I know is that the people writing the checks at the state of Minnesota never, ever, ever verify that any trip was ever made or that any appointment was ever made with a dentist, chiropractor, or anything.
And so these people are able to start up these businesses and then immediately get funds from the government?
Yes, so interestingly that you bring up licensing, because another area of fraud that I exposed was all of these autism centers, because I would drive around the Twin Cities. I said, well, there's another autism center. I said, what's going on with all this autism? Is there something in the water? And then I started to look at, well, who owns these autism centers? And virtually 99% of them were owned by Somalis.
And is there an autism outbreak here in Minnesota right now?
There is not. But to open an autism center, you do not need a license.
And so people are claiming their children are autistic to receive money from the government.
Yes.
And the government underneath Tim Walz's leadership, they're not going in and investigating and doing their due diligence to say, maybe we shouldn't give this company $1 million.
Well, so what's happening is there have been some sporadic inspections done at these facilities, and I have records of some of these inspections. And one inspection, they'll get 11 violations. A child care facility with 11 violations, that is bad. I mean, unsanitary conditions, broken furniture, no play area for the children. And so they write these things in their report, but then they never follow up to make sure. They never physically revisit the site to make sure that any of those violations are corrected. What they accept is documentation from the center that they've made the corrections.
So at the end of the day, they're able to violate certain guidelines, yet they still receive money somehow. How is there not somebody inside the state who's saying, okay, we're seeing this fraud happen, let's maybe not just continue to give money to these people?
So you've probably heard the term Minnesota nice before, which back in the old times, in the old days, it meant something. Now it's actually a curse upon us because the people here, the majority of the people, they're afraid of their own shadows. I'm an outcast because I'm exposing this fraud. I'm telling the truth. My family has basically disowned me because of all of this fraud that I've uncovered, and I've been called a racist, an Islamophobe, a white supremacist, Nazi, all these things. And I said, look, everything that I talk about is verified. I have it in writing. I've gone to politicians. I've gone to Washington, D.C. over the years. I said, look, this fraud is out of control. This is approaching $100 billion. And now you see the U.S. attorney, they started with defeating our future, $250 million. I said, no, that's amateur hour. Then they said it's $1 billion. Now, just today, the U.S. attorney held a press conference and said the fraud is possibly as much as $18 billion, but we don't really know what period of time, and I'm telling you, it's way more than that. You have transportation, autism, child care, daycare, health care, and nobody knows what's health care because they're not health care providers. So what is the health care? They have in-home health care.
And so what's the need, for example, for 1,200 transportation companies inside of Minnesota? What's the need for that many transportation?
Well, there isn't. There isn't. You're talking about getting a right. You already have services that are provided. You have Metro Mobility that offers free rides to seniors and low-income people. And so to have that many non-emergency medical transportation companies, it's not possible that they can transport that many people. I have been to many of these transportation companies, and I've been time-stamping my photographs for a whole year at one facility in Minneapolis, and those vans in that parking lot have not moved 1 inch in an entire year. They're all still sitting there.
And so when you think about it, you have, with the transportation companies, you have the adult care centers. So are they working hand in hand together to then say, we're getting the services from them, the adult daycare centers, to then transport them to their appointments?
So my feeling is this transportation deal is kind of the belly of the beast because you also have these charter schools, and there's a school in North Minneapolis called Bonadier Academy. It's a K through 12 school. So that's K through 12. So that's 13 years, 13 classes, right? And they say they have 150 students. I found data that they have 136. So that's 10 people per class. How is that possible? And they're getting somewhere around $20 to $30 million a year for what?
So 130 students, and they're receiving around $20 million.
Or more, yes.
A lot of these schools are.
Yes.
The fraud here is like exuberant amount of numbers as to how much they're actually enabling to happen here. We went to a fraud committee, and you saw the people. I even confronted one of the ladies myself, and she started to blame the fraud and deflecting it upon how there's fraud everywhere. And she didn't take any accountability. She didn't take responsibility. In fact, she blamed Trump for the fraud that's been happening here inside of Minnesota.
Right. So Kristen Robbins is the chairwoman of the fraud committee, and she was attacked by that Democrat member you were just talking about for not telling that committee about all this fraud. Well, the law says in Minnesota that if you are an elected or public official and you are aware of fraud or suspected fraud, it's Minnesota Statute 3.971, Subdivision 9, that you must report that fraud or suspected fraud immediately to the Office of the Legislative Auditor, the OLA, and then the OLA decides which law enforcement agency to refer the complaint to.
And they failed to do that.
No, Kristen Robbins did that. She said, I reported it to the OLA, and the Democrat, she had no idea how things work in Minnesota. She was just so enraged about all this fraud getting exposed.
Yeah, because they don't want to take accountability, because the fraud is so blatant. You can go to any of these daycare centers, there are no children anywhere.
Last Saturday, I was in front of the governor's mansion, and I was attacked by 3 Somali men. It's on camera. I made a 911 call. Nobody came to help me. The week before that, I fought off a knife attack. And these people are very violent, and people are afraid of them. The police are even afraid of them. And the police chief is out there telling the public, if you see an ICE agent, call 911. I mean, it's insanity. It's just pure evil. I mean, it's...
Now, let's directly talk about the Somali population, because, for instance, you get attacked by 3 Somalians, the police don't come, they're told to call police if they see ICE. How come Somalians have been able to get such a strong foothold here inside of Minnesota, specifically here in Minneapolis?
The reason is that the Somali community is a closed community. What I mean by that is they do not talk to outsiders, and they are ruled with an iron fist by the Somali mafia. And one of those guys is the guy who just got convicted of $7.2 million of fraud, a unanimous jury verdict, and Judge Sarah West overturned the verdict. I couldn't believe it. That was my discovery of all that fraud. I'm the one who got that guy brought before the jury, and then they find him guilty, and they let him go. And now you have Keith Ellison, who says he's going to appeal the verdict. Well, he's a Muslim. He's going to find a way to screw it up.
So even if they are committed for fraud, that guy, he's committed for how much?
7.2 is what the unanimous jury verdict, 7.2 million.
And then they just went ahead and released him.
The judge overturned the verdict. He's walking free as we speak, still collecting money from the state. And it's federal money too. So we need the feds to come in here, because this is not all state money. There's federal money that's involved here, and it's way beyond anybody's imagination, the total amount. The state doesn't even know. The feds don't even know.
And so, for instance, why would that judge bow down to the head of the Somali mafia here?
What I can tell you is that it's a voting bloc, and what they say is, if you do something to go against our community, we're going to vote for, and they all vote together, and there's ballot harvesting, I've seen them do it, that we're going to vote for your opponent unless you do what we tell you to do.
And so is it all purely for votes?
Yes.
And so this building right here, Cedar Riverside, major, massive apartment complex. How many Somalians do you think live in there, for instance?
Well, this is just one complex. You've got 20 more just like this around the Twin Cities, and they're all Somali. You're talking probably 100,000 or more people, and they're all living rent-free. They're driving a vehicle that you paid for. They're eating food that you paid for. Everything they do is something that you paid for.
And for instance, that entire block will then go and vote for one specific candidate.
They'll have one person go there and collect all the ballots, and nobody tracks. They could say they have 9 people living in an apartment. They're going to send them 9 ballots. And then they have someone who comes along, collects all the ballots, and they fill them out, and then they deliver them all to the ballot box or wherever they deliver them all at once. There's no verification. Nobody's doing anything to know if these people are even citizens that are voting.
And how well have they integrated into society here?
Not at all. It's either you do things their way, or you're a racist or an Islamophobe, and you will be attacked. My life's been threatened many times. I've had people tell me, just stop doing what you're doing. They're gonna take you out. And I can't do it, because everybody says somebody ought to do something about that. I'm that somebody. I'm the guy who's doing something about it.
And what led you to want to do this, where you're so passionate about it, where you've done your own investigation? If you were working for the government, you'd be called a whistleblower. Thankfully, you're a whistleblower in your own way, as far as you're coming out with the information, with the numbers. When we went to all the daycare centers, you had the numbers specifically as to how much money these people have been receiving at these daycares, and there wasn't a single daycare inside of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area that wasn't receiving at least $1 million.
Yeah, so we hit 3 of the top, and so when you're talking about money going to the daycare, we were looking just specifically at CCAP money, which is child care assistance payments. And the one daycare we went to on Chicago Avenue that said they had 102 children, they got $3.6 million in fiscal year 2025. And in 2024, they got $2.8 million. And how many kids did we see there? 0. In fact, we didn't see a single child at any of the child care facilities, and that's the way they all are every single day.
And I want to keep going in about how Somalia has gained such a stronghold of this area of Minnesota. They're building mosque block to block in St. Cloud. That's just about an hour away from Minneapolis. And here in Minneapolis and St. Paul in the Twin Cities, you have entire apartment complexes where there are not a single white Caucasian living inside.
Right.
And then you also have, I've heard in Rochester, it's pretty bad as well. But how did they come in and then expand to the point where they kicked out everybody from a college area to where the point where they have now the apartment complex? How have they expanded so much here inside of Twin Cities areas?
It's because they all stick together. They all sing the racist Islamophobe mantra over and over and over. They'll lie, they'll say you assaulted them, they'll do all these things until eventually they force people out. Right up the road from us is Palmer's Bar. It opened in 1906. I used to go there because you could drink when you were underage, and I went to the U of M, so hey, you could have a beer. And that place was legendary, and what happened was the residents who live in that building right behind us filed so many false reports against patrons of that bar and the bar itself that the city went to the owners of Palmer's Bar and said, look, you either shut down voluntarily or we're going to drag you through and we're going to make you spend a lot of money and we're still going to shut you down. So that bar has been shut down, and now they're going to turn it into what? Another mosque.
So they push out what used to be Minnesota staples, such as Palmer's Bar, and now that bar is turning into a mosque.
There's a mansion over on 24th and Park Avenue, historic building. They bought that. They're turning that into a mosque. They're building another brand new mosque not far away. And it's like you're in a dream and there's something really bad happening to you and you're screaming and all these people are walking by and nobody hears you. That's what I live every day. That's my life every day. But I'm committed to doing what I can to end this. I just want it to stop.
And how have you seen the weaponization of the word racist and Islamophobe take power here?
It's incredibly powerful, and all I can describe it as evil. It is an evil that has taken hold here, and it's permeated all of our society. And the people in Minnesota, they just want to stick their head in the sand and pretend it doesn't. Somebody will do something about it. They don't have to do anything, or it's not going to affect them. And they don't. In their mind, they want to redecorate the upstairs bedroom when there's a massive crack in the foundation that's allowing all this water and dirt and everything to get in there. And they're worried about the upstairs bedroom. It's insanity.
And a real quick break from the interview to tell you guys about the sponsor of this video, Opus Clip. What used to just be an AI editor has now become the most powerful AI growth tool for creators and businesses. Over 10 million creators and businesses have started to use Opus Clip, and it's helped them gain over 60 billion views. It's super simple to use. All you do is you upload a YouTube video or upload a video into Opus Clip, and it'll come out tons of viral videos for you to then choose from. I even had my friend start using Opus, and he had just around 100 followers, and within a few videos, he was able to get a video to 30,000 views. And Opus Clip just came out their new AI editor 3.0 that comes with smarter auto framing, better virality scoring, and new captions. I personally love Opus because it helps me reformat my content for all platforms, whether it be Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, you name it, you can go and use Opus Clip. And for you guys watching this video, Opus is going to hook you guys up with a sweet deal. You'll get 1 week free and 3 months at 50% off. All you have to do is go to the link in the description of this video or the pinned comment down below and use code nickshirley. And now let's get back into the interview. And did you ever think this would happen to your town?
Never.
And when did it start to happen?
I first started to notice the tenets of this going back more than 20 years ago, and I started to say, what's going on here? And then I found out how a lot of these Somalis were getting to Minnesota, and let me tell you, they weren't going through customs like you have to. They weren't So I'll leave it at that. And then where did the bus bring them? Right there, to Cedar Riverside. That was the hub of Somali, their foothold in Minneapolis. And then Omar Jamal stood in a corner in downtown Minneapolis, got to be 15, 20 years ago, and he said, we're planting our flag right here. This is going to be Somali World Headquarters outside of Somalia, Minneapolis. And don't you know, the state flag of Minnesota was changed from this beautiful historic flag to the flag that is almost exactly the same as the flag of Somalia.
Well, Tim Walz said your old flag was racist.
Yeah, it was a farmer with a plow horse. That's racist. Why, because it's somebody working? That's racism.
Tim Walz, he's an interesting man. He's enabled a lot of this fraud to happen underneath him. Was the fraud happening before Tim Walz as well?
Well, likely yes, it was, because he's going for his third term as governor. So Tim Walz is from Nebraska. He was a teacher. He lied about getting a Nebraska Chamber of Commerce award. He lied about his military service. Everybody knows. And he's scared to death now that this fraud has been exposed, and he's scrambling. And he has a press conference on gun control. I go, what do you, gun control? You got $100 billion of fraud. You're going to talk about people not walking around with machine guns? I mean, what is this, the 1920s?
And inside these apartment complexes, not just Cedar Riverside, how do they force, because this one right here, you only see Somalians. How do they force any other race, white, Asian, black, Mexican, how do they make it so that these apartment complexes are only their apartment complexes?
So there are a couple of ways they do it. One is to incessantly harass any non-Somali tenant so that they have to move out, or they file false complaints, multiple complaints against someone until they're evicted. The city will come in if it's a city-owned building, if it's income housing, and they'll evict that person, and then the Somali moves in. And that's how they've been doing it all around the Twin Cities. Folks, I'm just telling you, as bad as you think it is, it's 10 times worse. You'll never see anything like this. If you went to any country around the world, you'll never see anything as bad as it is right here in Minneapolis.
So for instance, say I were to move inside and got myself an apartment over in Cedar Riverside, and I started listening to music a little too loud or watching a movie too late at night, and somebody next door had a baby, and they said that was just too much a noise complaint. Would they call you a racist, or how would they get you out of the apartment?
Yeah, they would say you harassed them, you threatened them, you assaulted them. It's something that their mindset is that they don't care as long as they can get their way. They don't care what happens to anybody else who's not a Somali. And they have warring factions within the Somali community because this is such a cash grab that they're fighting them. There are factions within the Somali community that are fighting amongst each other.
So do you think right now in Somalia, people know if they make their way to Minnesota, they'll be able to get $1 million?
Absolutely. Everyone knows it's wide open. It's the Wild West.
Because I say $1 million because every place we went to and where we have gone, everything is above $1 million. Like, it's not just like a $500,000. It's not just what would be a great salary of $60,000 to $100,000 for a single person. It's literally millions of dollars. It's not a joke when you say that these people are becoming millionaires just from getting money from the government.
So think about it. You get up and you go to work every day and you make $50,000, $60,000, and you work like crazy. Some of you work two jobs, 3 jobs. They're not working at all, and they're getting new free cars, free housing, free food, everything. It's completely out of control here. I need the federal government to come in here and put a stop to this because the political will in Minnesota is not here to do it.
And because that money that they receive what are they? Are they grants? Are they relief? What are the money that they get? What do they label that as?
Well, so interesting you brought up grants because that's a whole nother, so they have a thing called Minnesota Deeds, DEEDS grants. And I looked at the list of grants that were just issued this year, and they're about 75% Somali owned. So those are more money they're just giving them, and they're not even tracking what's being done with the money. They fill out a form saying we're going to use it for this. Nobody follows up. So you've got child care, you've got transportation.
But what's that money labeled underneath as? Say, for instance, when $1 million is sent to a child care, is that money labeled as what would it be?
Well, it's a number of things. It's CCAP, which is child care assistance payments. It's SNAP benefits. It's learning. So they separate it as learning. So we're a learning So we're not just a child care, we're teaching them something. So there are all these separate payments that are going in. So there's no one label because it's coming in for all these different things, but it's all coming from the Department of Human Services.
And so with that money, say they get the $1 million into the daycare, will they have to pay taxes on that $1 million? Or is that tax-free money?
Well, so what's funny is that KSTP just came out and published a story that said Somalis are the economic engine that's driving Minnesota, that they paid $76 million or something in taxes. I just laughed. I said, what? They're an economic benefit to Minnesota? But that's what I'm fighting every day, is a media that is completely on the Somali side, and I don't understand why people have this mindset. It's evil. We're trying to fix our state, and you look at the long game on this. You say, well, what is the end result of this? The end result of this is that this becomes Somalia.
I mean, they already planted their flag here. Essentially,
They literally planted their flag at the Capitol. It's a flag of Somalia, literally.
But do they pay taxes on that money they receive from the government when they get sent to their daycare, when they get sent to their adult daycare, when they get sent to their transportation companies?
They're paying a different rate, if they're paying any at all, and a lot of it is being redirected. So there's stories that they're funding al-Shabaab, and so this money typically doesn't go directly back to Somalia. The money they send back, they'll send it through Saudi Arabia, they'll send it through Kenya, because then it's not a direct link from the Somalis here back to Somalia, so they're routing it through a third party.
So that's a whole different thing about them funding al-Shabaab and terrorist organizations. But I want to get to my point. It's like, is that money that they are getting from the government, will they eventually pay tax on that, or is that just tax-free money essentially?
I don't know. I can't get any of the tax records from the state.
Because, for instance, if me or you make $1 million, we're going to be given 40% back to the government. At least
if you
40%.
live here, you're going to pay probably 50%.
Yeah, so
yeah.
If they get $1 million, they aren't getting taxed on that, most likely, especially if it's as just a loan, not even a loan, it's just money that they're giving to the daycare to take care of. It's not government benefit.
To my understanding, it's not considered income. Yeah. Because it's an assistance payment.
And so that's why they are doing all these businesses that are based off of assistance for daycare, for adult daycare, for transportation, because they're getting money for these companies. You can label them as assistance versus being for profit.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Now let's talk about al-Shabaab and the money that's being allegedly sent to these terrorist organizations in Somalia. Spoke to a man who, he's also a whistleblower who used to work for the police department inside of the airport. He said every single week, literally millions of dollars worth of cash would be funneled through the airport, through TSA here in Minnesota, at the Minneapolis airport. How are they moving the money from Minnesota, from the taxpayer of Minnesota, back into these Somalian-run businesses, into the hands of people like al-Shabaab, who are linked with al-Qaeda?
So anyone who travels knows that if you have over $10,000 in cash, you're going to get stopped by TSA, and they're going to want to know, where did this money come from? And if you're a couple traveling together, they're going to combine the money that you're carrying and say, okay, what is the total amount that you're carrying? And I talked with a TSA agent who worked at the Minneapolis airport, and there was a Somali man who came through with 2 suitcases. And he put on his declaration that he had $750,000 in cash. And so the TSA agent said, whoa, wait a minute here. And so they took him to a secure room. They opened up the suitcases. Sure enough, $750,000 in cash. And so she called the police. The police came, and then the officer said, well, I've never had this before. This is such a large amount of money. He said, where'd this money come from? The guy said, I don't have to tell you. I don't know. And so he called his superior, and the superior said, okay, I got to make a call and get back to you. And then he called him back and said, you got to let him go, because he declared the money. He goes, no, we can't let it. So they're not even verifying where these funds came from. And so how deep does this go? How many people are involved? How bad is this?
Because, I mean, how does somebody acquire $750 in cash? For instance, you can't even go to the bank right now and ask them for $100,000. You'd have to go through a big process to get that much money in cash. The only way that they could be acquiring this much money is through running a daycare, for instance, where they're literally receiving anywhere from $1 million to $3 million.
And so one thing to keep in mind is that Somalis will not pay tax, because tax is something that is reserved for them to impose on others. So they will not pay tax. So when they're buying these $1 million homes and these brand new SUVs and going to Costco and loading up their carts, they're paying with cash, or they're using their EBT card, which is typically loaded with $5,000 a month. So on top of, it's like pouring syrup on top of chocolate. I mean, where does it stop?
So they're using cash instead of like a card, for instance, through Chase Bank.
Well, they're walking into car dealerships with $100,000 in cash, 120. Here you go, I'll give cash. And these dealers are supposed to be reporting that to the IRS because it's more than $10,000, and they have to track where the money came from. And they haven't been doing that because why? And the guy's going to walk in and give me cash, and of course I'm going to take it. So there are a lot of people who are complicit in this fraud, and there are a lot of people who are going to be called to answer for what they've done.
Now let's talk about people like Ilhan Omar and her influence here on the Somalian community. What influence does she have on what happens here?
Well, she's a key reason that we have so many Somalis here. She was a big proponent of drawing them in because once she realized how loose the regulations were here on all of this money, this welfare money, this assistance payments, she started bringing the Somalis in, and they came in from all around the country. So not only were they coming from Somalia, they were coming from Texas and Florida, New York, and everywhere else, because the word went out, you got to come to Minnesota because it's open season here. And so that's why, and they're still coming here, and they're still gonna get money. And so Ilhan Omar is, I mean, she's the godmother of the Somalis.
And so whatever she says goes.
Yes.
And you keep referring that Somalians don't move alone. If one of them moves, 10 of them move.
Yes.
So that's how they're able to multiply and almost compound here as far as their populations.
And so the idea is that they want to repopulate as quickly as possible. So that's why all these Muslim women you see, they're always pregnant all the time. Because when you have all these children, now you can start to overtake a city, a society, and now you run for school board, you run for office. We had a Somali guy, couldn't believe he didn't get elected mayor of Minneapolis, but Jacob Fry, who was elected mayor, he's even worse. He bows down to the Somalis, he tries to speak their language. It's embarrassing.
And so these Somalis, they're Muslims, and Muslims are able to have 4 wives. And
yes.
They're able to have, I don't know, I doubt there's a cap to how many kids you can have, but by having 4 wives, you're able to have more kids than a person with just 1 wife.
Yes.
And so obviously they're going to multiply and compound inside of Minnesota. So who knows what Minnesota will look like in 50 years from now?
If this doesn't stop, Minnesota's done. It will be Somalia.
Like, we know the fraud attracted them, but initially what attracted them to come here? Because a lot of them came underneath Obama with what was happening in Somalia. A lot of refugees were taken into the United States. What attracted them to come straight to Minnesota? It's freezing up here.
I think part of the reason was that the churches, especially the Lutheran Church, got involved with bringing over a lot of refugees, and it started back with the Hmong population, which was very large in St. Paul, and I was happy to have them here. They worked, they opened businesses, they were good community members, they were good citizens, and so I think they leaned on the churches to say, hey, we need to bring these people over because they're refugees, they're fleeing conflict. What conflict? I mean, they're always at conflict. They're tribal people, they're always at war. Bringing them over here doesn't cure that. All it does is bring those problems over here.
When they were initially brought over, did you think, as they were initially brought over as refugees, was there a plan for them to eventually go back to Somalia?
No, I think the plan was that once they got here and they had their hand out and the state started putting money in, they said, I'm not going anywhere. And you're right, they hate the cold weather because it gets really cold here. But when you're getting $1 million a year, you can live through the winter.
And Trump, in a press conference, he was talking about how all they do is complain. He said the word bitch, all they do is bitch, and they complain. If they're coming from paradise, then they could complain, but they're coming from garbage, is what Trump said, and then complaining. How come you think some people that fled a place that was so horrible now come here to the United States and they continue to complain and play victim to the point where they call, if you don't support what they're doing, they call you an Islamophobe, or they call you racist, to the point where eventually everyone's kicked out of an apartment complex and it's full of just one race. Doesn't that make them racist?
I can tell you why they do it. Because, so what is the penalty for a Muslim who leaves the Islamic faith? Death. That's the penalty. And so the idea of Islam is that the world is theirs, that we're invaders, that we don't have a right to anything, that Allah has created the world for them, and they're going to take it back. So there's a word in Islam called taqiyya, and it's a word that allows Muslims to lie, steal, cheat, do whatever they have to in order to further their goal of a world caliphate.
One of those examples I've seen personally is you go up to one of them and you ask if they speak English, and they'll say no. They'll even say they speak French instead.
That's another area of fraud. Thank you for bringing that up. So
they use that as a way to not speak with you, to pretty much not integrate, and then they complain that people can't communicate with them.
Right.
Well, like yesterday at Walmart, I couldn't even speak with the lady who was checking us out because she wasn't speaking English, and I had to put in my phone what I needed so that way she could read and then take me to where I needed to go.
So this dovetails into yet another area of fraud, and that is the interpreter services. So when a Somali goes to the doctor, magically they forgot how to speak English, so they need an interpreter there. So the county brings in an interpreter at $100 an hour, minimum 8 hours, to interpret what the doctor is telling the patient.
So that's another layer of fraud that nobody's even talked about or revealed.
And it's millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars all on its own. Interpreter services.
Yeah, because what percentage do you think of these people, especially if they were born here in the United States, they speak English, right? Like
of course they do.
They should not be saying, I no English. Some of you.
And then remember, the interpreter has to get to the doctor's office or the hospital. How are they getting there? The transportation company, and then they got to get back home. And that patient had to get to the doctor's office. How? Transportation. Kids got to get to school. How? Transportation. That's why I said the transportation is the hub of, really, I think, all of this.
So basically what we're talking about between all these fraudulent businesses, the daycare, the autism centers, the adult daycare, the home services, and then the transportation, and then on top of that you have it looped in with them going eventually to the doctors for translators to be paid by the state.
That's exactly what's happening, yes. The county or the state is paying for an interpreter or translator every time they go. And when they go to have a baby, they don't speak English. So the translator will sit there, and if they're there for more than 8 hours, then it loops back into another 8 hours. So it's 16 hours as a minimum.
So they've chosen, quite frankly, the most perfect industries to then work together in a web.
So, look, I have to give them credit for being clever enough to stay together and do all this. My big issue is with the people at the state of Minnesota who keep writing these checks over and over and over. So there's not one check that got written by accident. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of checks, millions of checks, and maybe $100 billion in fraud that they sent out, and they never bothered to find out how the money was being spent.
And do these people, for instance, if they're having a baby, are they paying to have that baby? What happens if they can't pay the doctor?
They don't pay for anything. The health care is all covered. Housing's covered, health care is covered, everything. Food, everything.
And because, like you're saying, everything's in cash, are they then able to apply for SNAP benefits and
yes.
for welfare and stuff like that?
Yes.
Because if you don't have cash...
They're showing zero income.
They're showing zero income.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, the ladies working at a daycare, they're not getting paid on paper, and they're just filing for welfare?
Right. So what happens is you have payments from the federal government, you have payments from the state, you have payments from the county they're in, and you have payments from the city they live in. So all those things, that's why I said this is $100 billion. It could be $200 billion. It's such a big number. You can't wrap your mind around it. It's like, how did this happen?
You can't really blame the Somalians, because if you were in the same position, you'd probably do the exact same thing. Because you're hearing everyone receive millions of dollars, and that's why you need to really focus on the corrupt politicians that are inside of the Capitol that are allowing this to happen.
I blame the politicians for allowing this to happen.
And then the Somalians, it's morally wrong for them to be doing this, to be frauding the people.
Well, again, it's not because Turkey allows them to do this because it furthers their goal of a world caliphate. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's what they're after.
So by enabling them to, they're able to justify this morally, because if they receive all this money, they have all this stuff, they have a good base, they can then continue to grow Islam.
Right, and so what's really sad from my perspective is Franklin Avenue here in Minneapolis was always very heavily American Indian occupied. The Indian health boards there, their opportunity centers there, their community centers there. The sidewalks even have Native American symbols in them as you go along, in the concrete as you go along, and that area has been totally co-opted by the Somalis.
It's a Somali takeover, quite frankly.
And so they're spreading out Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Cloud, Rochester, Owatonna. It's going throughout the entire state of Minnesota. I'm waiting for them to really take over Duluth. They haven't done that yet, but they're up there.
And when we're talking about Islam as well, because that's intertwined with the Somalis, because the majority of them are members of Islam. They're
Every
Muslim.
one of them.
How much are you seeing Islam grow here, the influence of Islam in the Quran? How are you seeing people convert as well?
Well, so when someone becomes a Muslim, let's say they're Catholic or Lutheran or whatever, and they become a Muslim, the Muslims use the term revert. They don't say convert, they revert, because they say, well, everybody should have been Muslim, and if you weren't, you were going down the wrong path. Now that you've become a Muslim, you reverted back to where you should have been all along.
And are you seeing a lot of people convert to Islam?
I hear stories. I mean, I don't know of anyone personally who would do it, but it's ironic that there's snow out there, because this is like this giant snowball that's rolling downhill, and I feel like I'm the only one here trying to stop it. I'm going, you help, help, help. And it's just
insane.
It's insane.
And let's get into some of the paperwork you have about the fraud. You have all the paperwork. You've done your own internal investigation. You even came up with charts.
Well, we can start with one of the child care facilities that we visited was called Mako Child Care, M-A-K-O. Well, interestingly, there are two child care facilities located at that same address. There's Mako Child Care, and there's another one called Mini Child Care. And between the two of them over the last 3 years, they've gotten about $8 million in 3 years between the two child care. And I've been by that place literally 300 times, and I never, ever, ever have seen a single child there. In fact, I've never seen a single child at any of these child care facilities.
And that's just one example. That's
one.
So two child care companies in the same building.
Yes. And then we have another example here. There was a daycare called Creative Minds Daycare, and they had so many violations. This is how bad this place was. So many violations that the state of Minnesota actually said, no, you guys, you can't. So they still got, in fiscal year 2025, they got $2.45 million, even though they had all these violations. So they shut down Creative Minds, and they reopened the next day under a new license, and they called it Super Kids Daycare Center. But they still have they happen so fast, they still have the Creative Minds Daycare sign on the building.
Let's keep going. So for just there alone, we've uncovered $11 million worth of fraud in 3 daycares.
So then there was another facility that has, my records show that they had 4 child care facilities in there, but I think the number when I actually went there was 7. And one of them was called Minnesota Child Care, and they claimed to have 102 kids that are at child care every single day. And I said, well, I mean, how is this 102 kids? That's a lot of kids. And they got $3.6 million in fiscal year 2025, and they had no kids. No kids. In fact, none of the child care in those. In fact, some of them don't even answer that there was nobody there. and they're still getting millions of dollars. Nobody is bothering to follow up. Even if they find violations, they're not going back. So for a place to shut down, it was so bad. They said, well, we better shut down. But then they reopened the next day under a new license. Same place, 3801 Portland Avenue, Minneapolis.
And let's go through some of these numbers you have. Let's go through some more of them, because I think the numbers are horrific, quite honestly, because people like me and you, we work extremely hard, whether it be through YouTube or whatever business you're in. We work really hard for our dollar, and so do everyone watching this video, whether you're working at McDonald's or if you're working at Charles Schwab.
Okay.
You're working hard, and so these people are literally making millions of dollars just by opening up daycare. So let's go through the number as to how much fraud, how much money these daycares and other companies are making.
Well, I don't have numbers for all the child care centers because there are so many of them that I can't even get all the data from the state of Minnesota. It's not even on there. So I'll go, some of these places aren't even registered with the state of Minnesota, but I know they're getting money because they're brand new BMWs in the parking lot. So this one in St. Paul at 1048 Aurora Avenue called Aurora Child Care, it is this awful, it used to be like a woodworking store. It's a tiny little building with no parking, and they say that they have 106 kids, 106 kids in fiscal year 2025, which is July to June in Minnesota, so July of 2024 to June 2025, they got $3.1 million. How many kids do you think there were there? I went there 5 times. 0. I went there in the morning, I went there in the afternoon, I went there in the evening. There were no kids there at all. That's Aurora. Diamond Daycare, 460 Lexington Parkway North in St. Paul. They say that they have 97 capacity for 97 children. 97. 97. This place is tiny. It's like a 10 by 10 building. They got 1.5 million in fiscal year 2025, and they have no kids. None.
Yeah, there's no kids inside the daycare.
No kids. No
Let's
kids.
keep going.
Here's another one. Sweet Angel.
Oh, we love Sweet Angel.
Sweet Angel.
We paid him a nice little visit.
Yeah, we went to Sweet Angel. So Sweet Angel Child Care, 2740 Minnehaha Avenue, Suite 156. Again, a tiny facility, and they said they have 74 children. 74. So they're not 100. They're 74 kids. And they got 1.26 million in fiscal year 2025. They got to step up their game. They should be getting like 2.5 million, right? How many kids did we see there? 0. And what's weird about these child care facilities is all the windows are covered, and a lot of the time nobody answers the door. And even if they do, they yell at you, they scream at you. They're very violent people. Then we went to the Learning Center where they had the sign misspelled.
And what's interesting, when you go to these child daycare centers, all the windows are completely blacked out. The doors are locked. What's the door doing locked if you need to bring your child into the daycare? Doors are completely locked. The windows are completely blocked out. And these are not even like nice aesthetically looking buildings. These look like they're industrial buildings for warehouses.
Every single child care that I've been to has been in an industrial or commercial building with no play area for the kids, or some of them have some ramshackle novelty stuff outside. But you can see, I go there now, there's no footprints in the snow. There are no kids playing there. And the other thing that happens is when they do bother to inspect these places and they write a violation, this is right here. Correction documentation submitted and approved. They never went back to the facility. So if the violation was unsanitary conditions, broken furniture, inoperable bathrooms, they never go back and double check that the violation was corrected. All the child care facility does is send them documentation, say, yeah, we fixed it. And that's it. They go, okay, it's approved. And the payments keep rolling. The payments keep rolling.
And who approves these buildings?
Well, so...
Because, for instance, where I'm from, we don't have daycare centers every block. Here in Minnesota, you do.
Almost literally every block, you have a daycare, a child care center. And in a lot of them, you'll have a child care center listed at that address and a health care center and an autism center, all the same address. And you go, well, it's like a 12 by 12 building. What do you got, like 300 people? I mean, how is it possible? It's not. It's all fraud. It's total fraud. What I'm telling you is that Somalis do not send their children to child care ever, not once. It violates their faith.
Because would they trust another woman or another man with their children?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Let's keep going. Let's find some more fraud, because the fraud here is insane. I'm not joking when we say this is the fraud capital. And this will be one of the largest fraud scams ever to happen in America.
In the world. In the world. It's that bad.
So people literally in Somalia right now are probably getting on their phone right now messages saying, come to Minnesota. You can get millions of dollars.
So there's another agency at play here that is helping this fraud stay on steroids, and it's the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And this fine woman is the leader, Tiki Brown. So this is a source of more money. It's also this nonsense award that they give these child care called Parent Aware. It's a banner with a star on it. Oh, it's a Parent Aware award. And I said, I've never heard of that before. So I started to look it up. Yeah, it's a program she put together, and it's only given to Somali child care facilities. It doesn't mean a thing. There's no reason for it to be there. It's more nonsense from the state of Minnesota.
And do you have any more numbers right here? It's kind of fun to see how much fraud's actually happening, because it's actually unbelievable.
I've got numbers for probably, I don't know if it's 50 of the child care. There's so many of them that I can't even get all the data. So what I did, well, if I can deflect over to the transportation, because I go back to this transportation being the hub of all this fraud, because it's all connected through the transportation. So I'm trying to collect the data on over 900 of these non-emergency medical transportation companies, and the data is so overwhelming and so hard to get. I had to hire a computer specialist to write a program to extract the data, and he's up to 298 companies right now. He said it's so convoluted the way this is put together. When this dust settles on this transportation, this is going to be in the billions of dollars, billions, and nobody verifies any of these trips were ever made.
Because if you're driving around Minnesota, we drove around the highways, we spotted out 4 of the transportation vehicles going, because they have a number on the back of all their cars that's not the license plate number. There was not a single person transporting anybody.
No, I've never, and I've seen thousands of these vans ride around the Twin Cities because there are hundreds and hundreds of these companies. I've never, ever seen a single passenger in any of these vehicles, and they're all minivans, or the majority of them are minivans.
And when we're talking about fraud, fraud is fraud. A crime is a crime. It doesn't have to do with the race. It doesn't have to do with the religion. It's just the fact that fraud is fraud, and a crime is a crime. And it just so happens to be that the Somalians are working hand in hand with the government here, committing the fraud and allowing this crime to happen on the taxpayer citizen here who's paying a fistload of money to the government.
Exactly. So not only are Somalians guilty of fraud, but the people who are writing the checks are just as guilty. In fact, they're more guilty because they wrote the checks.
Exactly. And so this doesn't have to do anything with someone being a racist or Islamophobe. It's just the fact that fraud's fraud, and you don't like paying your state taxes here, knowing that it's just going potentially back into the hands of a terrorist organization like Al-Shabaab in Somalia.
Well, if this continues, the Somalis are going to own every single building in Minneapolis, and there will be literally 500 mosques here.
And now let's talk about Tim Walz. Do you think Tim Walz will be going to prison for this? And he's running for a 3rd term right now. So
my personal belief is that Tim Walz violated Minnesota Statute 3.971 because he did not, to this day, he has not reported the fraud to the Office of the Legislative Auditor, and that law says you have to report it. So even if it was in the news for months and months, he still had to personally report it to the OLA, and he's never done it.
And why would Tim Walz know about the fraud but not report it?
So, because again, the Somali community all votes in a block, and he needs their votes, because if you got they don't know how many Somalis are here. They say 80,000. I said it's way over 100,000. So they're all voting together, and that's a big number. And he's terrified of this racist Islamophobe label, and I don't understand it.
So do you think it's all due to political correctness that this has happened?
Yes.
And we've seen what's happened in Europe as they've let in a lot of countries from Northern Africa, the Middle East. Numbers of rape have gone up exponentially. The safety of their towns have gone up. The Christmas villages have gone down. New Year's celebrations have gone down in places like Paris. And I've been to some of these rallies myself in the United Kingdom, for instance, and I asked Tommy Robinson, the man leading this, in a separate occasion, how come this was able to happen? He said, well, because of political correctness and the fear of being called racist, it's so bad that we allowed our daughters to get raped. And here, maybe people aren't getting raped, but their bank accounts are, and their tax dollars are getting sent overseas to fund terrorist organizations. And this is just another component of what happens when people are too afraid to speak out due to the fear of being called a racist.
So what's been happening in Minneapolis, and again, there's an area by the university right over there, University of Minnesota, called Dinkytown. And again, it was a hip spot when I was in college. You went to pizza there. I mean, you kind of hung out there. And there is nobody who will go there at night because of the violence and the attacks, the robberies that have happened there. And these are Somali gangs who are doing this. And you know that's the case because they have cameras everywhere. And they say, oh, well, we know they had hoodies on. We don't have good footage. You know exactly who they are. They're smashing windows on cars over here. And I think it's a culmination of not having to work and not having to pay for anything. Well, what are you going to do all day? Go out idle hands.
You would almost feel like you're invincible if you're living here as a Somalian, knowing that, okay, my dad, he's getting millions of dollars from running this fake daycare center, and then I'm also able to go and commit a crime. If someone says anything, I'm going to call them a racist, and most likely whoever's writing the claim or the judge, because our king of the mafia here, who got caught for $7.2 million of fraud, and they just let him go. So maybe if I go bash in the window and steal that person's purse out of their car while they run to Starbucks, I'm probably not going to get charged. So I'm pretty much invincible. Let's just go out and do this while we have our idle hands, while nothing else is going on.
So I went to Catholic grade school. In fact, I went to Annunciation where that terrible shooting happened last summer. Those kids were killed. And when you misbehaved in Catholic school, you got the ruler, you got a whack, you got a slap on the wrist, you got an ear twist. I mean, these were, so you grew up pretty straight. It was pretty strict. And here there are no shackles because they have no fear of the consequences. And when a guy just convicted of $7.2 million in fraud is let go, that sends a signal to the entire Somali community, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, because I mean, if I was a teenager, especially if you're a teenager, you're not an adult, so you can't get charged as an adult. But if you know that people aren't getting in trouble for things like fraud, like if you know your dad's out there committing and making millions of dollars and he's probably laughing about it at the dinner table, if you see that old lady with the money or the lady with the purse and you go and steal, and you know the police aren't going to do anything. Right now the police won't even they're telling people here in Minnesota if they see ICE, call 911. So you know that the police is on your side, which is going to enable you to act in lawless ways because you might as well.
Yeah.
And that's very worrying for a lot of people. And people need to understand, like, this is not a thing where you get called a racist or if you get called an Islamophobe. A crime's a crime, fraud is fraud, a spade is a spade.
Yeah.
And if something's happened, you should be able to call it out for what it is.
So, Nick, it just flashed into my mind the name of that daycare we went to where the sign was misspelled. It's Early Learning Center, but they didn't spell the word learning correctly, so it's Early Learning Center, and that sign has been like that for 9 years, 10 years. And when we were there, that gentleman who worked at the restaurant right there in that same building came out because that woman thought we were ICE, and she was screaming, ICE, ICE, ICE. So the guy came out to see what was going on. And we said, oh, well, we're just trying to talk to someone at this child care. And he said, what child care? I said, we're right here, Early Learning Center. He goes, oh. I said, well, how long have you worked at the restaurant? 8 years. Well, how many children have you seen here? None, never. We went to the nail salon across the street that directly faces the child care, the early alert center, and said, well, how many kids do you see here? I said, what kids? No kids. We never see kids.
How many people do you think are just living life, like similar to that one guy outside of the daycare center who's been living there for 8 years? He didn't even know that was a daycare, and he's never seen a child in there. How many people do you think, how many Minnesotans do you think are just living day to day, going about their life, not knowing that millions of dollars are being funneled through fraudulently every single day?
So, fortunately, I kept at this. I started sounding alarm years and years and years ago that this was happening. And finally, I started to get some traction, and now it's out in the news, and now we got the U.S. Attorney involved. That's all my groundwork, all that fraud. I uncovered all that. And again, had I been a state of Minnesota employee, I'd be a whistleblower. I'd be entitled to $1 billion. I don't care. I don't want the money. I don't want fame. I just want it to stop.
And do you think it will stop, or what will put this to a stop?
Well, we're at a fork in the road right now. And we either go this way, which is the destruction of our society, literally the destruction. I'm not being pejorative or using rhetoric. The literal destruction of our society, or we stop this and we say, look, you either assimilate, this is America, you become part of our culture, you can have your own faith, you can do all that, but you become part of our society, or you get out.
Do you think they will assimilate, or where do you think this will actually go?
They will never assimilate. And again, one of the women Tuesday when we went to the child care, she screamed, we're American citizens, we're American citizens. Well, the reality is there's a difference between being an American citizen and a naturalized U.S. citizen. There's a big difference.
Because a lot of these people have been here for 20 years. A lot of them are first generation born Americans. But for those that came underneath Joe Biden in the past 4 years, or those that are naturalized, they very well could get deported, right?
Well, so...
especially those that came underneath Joe Biden. For instance, how many more people did you see come into Minnesota when Joe Biden opened up the borders? Is that a lot?
10,000, 20,000. I mean, just it's been a mass influx.
And they've been here for, at this point now, they've been here probably 4 years. They probably had a baby. Therefore, they have an anchor baby here, and it's going to be a lot harder to deport somebody once they have that.
Anchor babies, yeah. Maybe 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, who knows?
Mm-hmm. And so do you think the only option is either they assimilate, which you don't believe is possible, or for them to get deported?
Yes.
What one do you think will actually happen?
I think it's gonna have to be a blend, because trying to deport all these people is going to be very difficult. The politicians, as you've seen, will rally. The bad politicians, the evil politicians who are benefiting from all this, they're going to rally behind and start screaming racism and Islamophobe and all that. But we have to get these people who are, I mean, this can't continue.
I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but do you think they'll get a point to where, say, a federal agent comes into a place like Cedar Riverside and they start going out through deportations, and then the gangs, we know there's rivalry gangs inside of these complexes where arms are eventually brought up and people start dying and shooting?
Yes. Yes. And so right now, the Minneapolis police are scared to death of doing anything to offend the Somali community. When you have the police chief of Minneapolis coming out and saying they're our neighbors, they're part of our society, and if you see ICE, call 911. Specifically said it to the Somalis. I mean, what is the message that sends that we're invincible, we can do whatever we want, Minnesota's ours?
And so you've gotten to the point where the federal government, state government are in a battle because the state government want to protect the Somalians, while meanwhile the federal government wants to actually implement the law of the land, because federal law is more important and has more power than local and state law.
Well, this is the importance of where the money came from for this fraud, because there are federal dollars that are mixed in, and that brings into play the supremacy clause, where the federal government could come into the state and say, we can come in here and we can do whatever we want, we can do our investigation because you used federal dollars that we sent you and you sent it out fraudulently.
Who knows? It's like a ticking time bomb here inside of Minnesota. Either it's going to continue ticking, or a bomb's going to go off,
Well,
metaphorically speaking.
And so all I know is that, I mean, if they take me out, because they've tried essentially twice now, if they take me out, at least I know I fought the fight, I did what was right, and I can go in peace.
So you really feel like they might try to kill you?
Yes.
Really?
They pulled a knife on me 2 weeks ago.
And so you're fearful for your life. Melissa Hortman, she was offed. She was killed. And she had just started to come out and speak against illegal migrants. Do you think that was a setup?
Well,
Inside job?
it's interesting because the person who shot her was a former hire of Governor Tim Walz. And so why did he target her? Because you're right, she was starting to speak out about immigration, and she's a Democrat. And so it was very taboo what she was doing. It's like a Somali talking to a reporter. You don't do it.
So you think she was killed for that reason?
It's possible it played a role in it.
Because if you look at it, she was starting to speak out against what was happening here in Minnesota with the illegal migrants, and then a man appears to her door and kills her and her husband. And that guy was a former hire of Tim Walz.
Yes.
This fraud had not been exposed until it started to get exposed, and then you saw Tim Walz literally say that he knew about it. He should have said something. Essentially, those weren't exactly his words, but he knew about the fraud happening, and this lady was killed by a Tim Walz hire.
So the answer to what's going to happen here in Minnesota is going to be determined in the next gubernatorial election, because Tim Walz is running for a third term. And if the people of Minnesota elect him to a third term, I'm done. I can't do this anymore, because that will signal the end of Minnesota, literally.
And it will signal the end of your protection as well, because this will just continue to go.
I mean, for God's sakes, I was in front of the governor's mansion and I was attacked by 3 Somalis. They had 100 cameras and nobody came out. They have a security detail at the governor's mansion. Nobody came out. I was on 911 and it took the police 11 minutes to get there. We have the faces of the assailants, their vehicle, and their license plate on the camera footage. And I just today now requested, because I haven't heard from the St. Paul Police Department, I requested the camera footage from the governor's mansion, the police report, and the 911 transcript.
And do you think born and raised Minnesotans are going to be able to outvote the Somalian population here?
So my concern is that it used to be just in Minneapolis, and then it went to St. Cloud, and now it's in Rochester, it's in Owatonna, they're heading up to Duluth. And so it used to be your only concern was how are they going to vote in the city here? Because once you get outside the Twin Cities, it gets pretty conservative out there. I mean, they're not happy about what's going on, and all these wishy-washy politicians. Most of them are from the Twin Cities here, and I don't know. But it can't continue. It has to change.
And is there any last message you'd like to give to the people about the fraud?
Look, this fraud has spread now. We've heard about it in Massachusetts. We heard about it in California. This is ground zero for the fraud. And what I'm telling you is, you can't sit around and say, that's terrible, somebody's got to do something about this. You have to do something, like I've been doing it here. You have to put yourself out there. You have to be the one to make the change. You can't sit around and wait for somebody else to do it, because it's not going to get done.
Well, God bless you, and thank you for your time, and thank you for the work you've done to
Thank you,
expel
Nick.
the fraud.
Thank you for your time.